The 2022 season has finally finished, and as much as we love to discuss the drivers, we also have to remember that at the end of the day, Formula One is a team sport. Those teams are generally quite dysfunctional, but they are teams nonetheless, meaning that we can look back at the teams and judge their 2022 season performances against one another. So I had you, the wonderful viewer of this video, rank the constructors from worst to best over on my community tab. You gave the teams a rating out of 5 stars, and here are your results. Or if you didn't take part in the rankings, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you can be part of the next one, and here are someone else's results. In at number 10 is AlphaTauri with an average rating of 1.88 out of 5 stars. As you can see, I've broken it down a little bit so you can see the driver's stats separated, but we're going to be talking about the teams generally as a whole. Now, do I agree with placing AlphaTauri right at the bottom of this list? Yes, I think that I do. Obviously, with the new regulations for 2022, it was difficult to know how each team was going to adapt, but I think they've definitely adapted the worst. I think the comment that summarized it the best was by far the most disappointing team of the season, as in 2021, Gasly in particular was putting in some stunning performances, but this year really couldn't get to grips with the new car, whilst I think everyone expected a step up from Tsunoda in his second season in Formula One, which I think we saw in parts, but we didn't get to see exactly how good he is because the car's performances were so hit and miss race after race. Also, considering just how closely the team are connected to the Red Bull setup, I know that they have their own team in Italy, their manufacturing is their own separate entity, but you would think that, they'd just have a chat with their sister team at some point in the season when things were going so wrong. The way the team have fallen to 9th in the constructors is definitely not where they wanted to be, not to mention the collision between teammates that happened during the Silverstone Grand Prix as well. The AlphaTauri boys certainly had more fun off the track than on it in 2022, but with Nick heading into the team next year, maybe they can start to fight their way back up through the midfield. We'll kind of just have to wait and see. Which I don't think will be the case for the team above AlphaTauri in these rankings, but below them in the standings, statistically the worst team on the Formula One grid in Williams, with an average rating for the team of 1.99 out of 5 stars. It's actually a tale of 3 drivers when it comes to Williams. Alex Albon, who came in to replace the talismanic George Russell after scrapping his way back onto the Formula One grid, Nicholas Latifi in what came to be his 3rd and final year in the sport, and the Monza maestro himself and now AlphaTauri man Nick De Vries, who came in for just one race but picked up 25% of the team's points. It's difficult to really judge Williams in comparison to the other 9 teams on the grid, as they're just so far off the rest on average. Jeremy made a really great point. Their lacking of having a 2022 test car will have hurt them, but just as a team, they lack the resources that the likes of Ferrari or Mercedes have in abundance. It was clear very quickly that the 2022 Williams car had some obvious aerodynamic weaknesses that made the car so track dependent. The contrast in pace on low speed versus high speed tracks was staggering, and the team just don't have the ability to upgrade the package enough to find a solution quickly. But it's not all doom and gloom. Alex Albon took to the team incredibly well and seems like the kind of driver that they need. Logan coming in 2023 will be really fun to watch. And an upgrade on Nicholas Latifi, let's just face it. And of course, their car is absolutely rapid in a straight line. And let's hope that that continues. Taking a little bit of a jump, next up you guys rated Aston Martin as the 8th best team in 2022 with a rating of 2.56 out of 5, although the ratings were very close between the teams in this lower midfield pack of the Constructors' Championship. Looking across the entire 22 races, I think having them on basically half of 5 stars makes sense because the first half of the season they deserved 0 stars whatsoever, but towards the end they probably deserved 5 stars for a few of those performances, especially from Sebastian Vettel. I wholly agree with James, who called them the most improved across the season, which isn't saying a lot considering the car they had at the start. For a team that supposedly gave up on the fight in the Constructors' Championship early in 2021 to focus on 2022, it really didn't look like it. If they hadn't improved, they would have probably been battling with Williams. But to be fair to the team in green, they did change their philosophy, which they had used the time in 2021 to develop, and it paid off. And they made the change moderately early as well, of course, coming in all the talks around Spain, the fact that they'd copied the Red Bull car, which was a fun talking point for a few weeks, and nice to bring back all of the pink Mercedes jokes from a few years ago. But they were investigated, no foul play was found, and you have to hand it to them. They adapted to the new design philosophy well, and once Sebastian Vettel clicked with the car, they looked like a proper midfield team contending with points and catching Alfa Romeo. Talking of catching Alfa Romeo, they're up next in your opinion, slotting in 7th place with Valtteri Bottas and the only rookie, Zhou Guanyu, with a score of 2.77 out of 5. Again, it was quite a polarizing season for the soon-to-be-gone Alfa Romeo setup. Out of the blocks, they were absolutely rapid. Robbie put it as a great start thanks to the lightweight C42, but poor reliability cost them many points in the first half. Bottas in particular battling it out with the Mercedes cars in the first few races, picking up heaps of points, putting himself in a great position in the standings, and then it all just kind of stopped. I aptly named him the Bottas barrier, as to prove you were above the midfield, you had to get past him in the standings, and he did slowly start to sink behind the Mercedes boys, Norris, Ocon, Alonso, but kept himself in the top half. Which, considering this fact from Kian, if the season started after Canada, Alfa would be P10 in the championship below Williams, just shows how great of a start of the season it was, and clinging on to 6th place in the Constructors' Championship by the finest of margins was actually very impressive. Looking at the drivers, I think they both did really well with the car that they were given. Joe had a very consistent and impressive rookie year, but those DNF stats are just damning and need to change if they want to make progress forwards. But I don't think they will. I think the fact that obviously they're going to have some roller coaster seasons up until 2026. Alfa Romeo are leaving at the end of 2023, so they're less likely to really push the team on. Then Sauber are seemingly in limbo for a couple of years before Audi come in. What this means for these two or for the team, we just have to kind of wait and see. But if they want to become a real rollercoaster team, they need to take notes from Haas, who we have in 6th place in our ratings, 2.78 out of 5 stars. And if you told me partway through 2021 what they would achieve in 2022, I would never have believed you. This might be my Steiner-loving heart talking rather than my head, but after the season that they've had, in comparison to what I expected, I may have had them even higher up. Reamsy said it all. It was a huge step in performance compared to last year. Consider where they were, and on top of that, during testing, they had to make a last-minute driver switch, parachute Kevin Magnussen back into a team that he left over a year ago, on very bad terms, it has to be said, but it just clicked, and undoubtedly the season will be remembered for that historic pole position at Brazil. But outside that, K-Mag had some very, very solid performances. Just imagine the points that he could have had if he hadn't smashed the end of his front wing off at the start of every other Grand Prix. Then there was Mick, who had a tough second year, although I don't really know how much he could have really learned in 2021 when he was racing basically on his own at the back of the pack. He did show flashes of what we all know is there. He picked up points, he had a few decent battles, like the battle with Max Verstappen in the British Grand Prix, for instance, but they were few and far between. On top of that, he's in a Haas team that is still the youngest and smallest team on the grid by a considerable margin, opening up the season with multiple car-destroying crashes, where he only really had himself to blame. It really did put the spotlight on him and started the talks of his replacement. Even around Monaco, the talks on the grid was, how do the team replace Schumacher? Where do they go now? So he was always playing catch-up and trying to win back favour, and he just didn't quite do enough. Overall, though, Haas had an incredible year, getting 8th in the Constructors' Championship. They definitely would have taken. Getting their first ever pole position is an amazing bonus. And, of course, they will undoubtedly have the best Drive to Survive episode too, so there's a lot to be happy about. If, however, there's going to be a Drive to Survive episode that's going to be a difficult watch, it's definitely going to be the behind the scenes of the McLaren team this year, who you've rated in 5th place, even with everything that happened to Daniel Ricciardo this season. Again, maybe it's my biases as a McLaren fan over the other teams, but this may be a little bit high, coming off the back of last season, going toe-to-toe with Ferrari for 3rd place in the Constructors' Championship, ending up 4th, but consistently finishing in the points, even getting their first win since 2012. I really thought that last year would be a springboard to come off of and build from, and I said at the start of the year, McLaren would finish 4th in the Constructors' Championship easily. Now, they did battle for 4th, but it wasn't easy in any way, and they couldn't hold on to it and lost out to Alpine, even though Alpine had horrendous reliability issues. Looking specifically at the team's performances this year, it has been so 50-50 because, as Chris says here, Lando is incredible, and I believe he is outdriving the car, but the team's handling of the Ricciardo situation was awful, and all you have to do is look at the stat comparison to see how good and how bad this season has been on either side of the garage. Lando Norris, for me, top 3 drivers on the grid right now. His form in 2022 has been untouchable, and he spent many races on his his own in 7th place, getting the maximum points possible for those drivers outside of the top 3 teams. McLaren need to deliver him a car soon, or his head will be turned by those larger teams. Then there's Ricciardo, who lost so much credibility this season, but I don't want to solely blame him. I think the way McLaren dealt with him and how their hand was forced by the Alpine situation, it was all very difficult to watch. Ricciardo couldn't get to grips with the car, but it also felt like the team didn't know how to move the car towards him also. I go into it in more detail in this video here, which I'll leave in the description, but overall I feel like McLaren need to improve next year and also need to help out Piastri, as they've put him under so much pressure as a youngster. I really hope that he can handle it. One team that has not been great at handling pressure this year is the team who you ranked in 4th for their 2022 season. It's Ferrari. On one hand, I feel like this rating is a little bit harsh for Ferrari. Like Zenon says here, they broke into the championship contender category from the midfield. They deserve some more respect. Gotta remember, in 2020, they were 6th in the championship. It looked like they were all falling apart, and I know there's almost infinite amount of cash to throw at it when you're Ferrari, but they still had to put the work in and give Leclerc a platform to show the pace that he really does have. And I also think getting Carlos Sainz in is one of the best pieces of Formula 1 business we've seen in a long time. They came out of the blocks of this season absolutely on fire. They look like championship contenders in both championships. To get themselves back into that category of car is very impressive. Then it just kind of went wrong. Driver errors from both Leclerc and Sainz in various races. France and Australia are the ones that come to mind straight off the bat. Engine reliability issues leading to grid penalties as well as DNFs. And of course the mistakes that the team made. Just to list a few: Monaco blowing Charles Leclerc's chances at a home Grand Prix victory with the worst tyre choices possible. Baku, the double DNF. Hungary with the strangest strategy choice I've ever seen. Brazil putting Charles Leclerc on intermediate tyres for the final qualifying session. Need I go on? Which just left everyone with lots of almosts and a few what ifs and a few WTFs mixed in there too. In a way, I feel a little bit sorry for them because they did do so well to get themselves back into contention for titles, only to fumble so many times and become the laughingstock of the grid at multiple points this year. I think looking forward, at least they know they have a fast car. Leclerc picked up the most pole positions of anyone this year and still managed to come home in 2nd place in the driver's standings. Once Carlos Sainz got on top of the car, he was also back to his consistent best, as well as throwing in his first win and multiple podium finishes. I stand by the fact that I think they still have the best driver pairing on the grid right now, and if they can sort out their reliability issues, they can sort out their internal issues, they are a dangerous prospect in 2023. Which can also be said for Mercedes, who you rated in 3rd place with an average rating of 3.21 out of 5 stars for their 2022 season. I think they also look like a very interesting prospect for the 2023 season. So Hill nailed it. Their car development from beginning to end of the season was great. They came into the season and looked so unstable. Their car was bouncing around like crazy, and they just couldn't get close to the Red Bull or Ferrari cars. But their reliability was the saving grace for the early part of the season. They were able to just stick in there every single race and wait for the cars in front of them to make mistakes. George Russell becoming Mr. Consistent, finishing top 5 basically the entire first half of the season, whilst playing around with Lewis's car and tinkering with the aerodynamic concept, leading to them making lots of progress while still being able to sit comfortably in 3rd place in the Constructors' Championship. Both drivers were really good at points this year too. Post-summer break, they took that step forward that actually put them battling with the rest of the top 6 instead of just kind of waiting for them to let them past, which I feel like Hamilton thrived in, and we maybe saw a few mistakes and inconsistencies rear their head for George, but looking at it statistically, there is not much to separate these two. George with a win, of course, and 1 extra points finish that made the difference in the championship, but going into next year, I know I've just said that Ferrari have the best driver lineup, but Mercedes are millimeters behind for me. It just becomes interesting between these two if they both get the opportunity to battle for wins or titles, because they both won't let up. And the tenacity that we've seen from George Russell, alongside the levels that we know Hamilton can reach when he's in a title battle, plus throw in Verstappen and Leclerc, 2023 could be absolutely fire. This one is painful to take after them finishing 4th in the constructor standings, but Alpine, according to you guys, had the 2nd best season of any team on the grid. They definitely had their moments in the spotlight this season and kept us entertained in lots of different ways, both on and off the track. Alvaro said their antics off track is 1 star, but on track, they've been fast, but unreliable. Of course, alluding to the summer break drama, losing veteran driver Fernando Alonso as he is making a shock move to rival Aston Martin. That's one thing, but not knowing about it until it's announced by the Aston Martin team is another. And the cherry on top of the embarrassment cake is then announcing his replacement being Alpine junior driver Oscar Piastri, only for him to reject the seat as well and move to another rival in McLaren. It really was one of the maddest things we have ever seen in Formula One. And a team as big as Alpine Renault going from 3 drivers to 1 so quickly is unprecedented. But the reason they've been ranked in second place for the 2022 season is because you guys like to annoy me and because of what they've achieved on track, which I have to say is very impressive. Getting themselves up into 4th place in the Constructors' Championship is a great step forward. On top of that, both drivers had a great season. Alonso is just a mortal at this point. He looked so quick for the entire year, but was unfortunately plagued by reliability issues that, in his words, cost him about 700 points. And then Esteban Ocon was just so consistent and showed why he's stuck around in the Formula One midfield for so long. He just seems to always end up in the points. His qualifying pace isn't rapid, but he gets into the groove in races, defends really well when he needs to, which meant that he just slowly kept adding to his points tally race after race. Looking at this season from a purely on-track perspective, the team smashed it, but it's going to be tricky to keep that going next season with Alonso out of the door and Gasly in, especially if Ocon and Gasly don't stay as friendly as they seem, at least in the media right now. Which, of course, leaves us with one team incredibly clear at the top, blowing everybody out of the water, just like Max Verstappen did in the Drivers' Championship. It's Red Bull with a rating of 4.65 out of 5. An almost perfect score for an almost perfect season makes complete sense. On track, they were just untouchable. What more did they have to do to get 5 stars? The stats are just crazy. 17 wins from 22 races. Double points finishes for every single time both drivers finish. Verstappen, most points in a season. Most wins in a season ever. I've just run out of superlatives to describe the on-track performance of this team over the course of 2022. They're just amazing. But there have been some problems in Paradise, especially off track this year. The team came under fire for breaking the 2021 cost cap regulations, and then were in the headlines for weeks until it was resolved. Then, of course, they came back into the headlines as the 2 drivers butted heads in Brazil. Max Verstappen refused to let Sergio Perez pass on the final lap of the Grand Prix, meaning the battle for second place became much harder for the Mexican, which he would go on to lose in Abu Dhabi, meaning that the team still wait for their first ever 1-2 in the championship. Sparking a lot of talk about the team dynamic, speculation around Perez crashing in Monaco on purpose, and of course coming into 2023, whether the team are going to be able to fix that teammate relationship. Although with all that going on off the track, the team on the track held it together incredibly well, had a near perfect season, and definitely deserved to be top of the Drivers' Championship, the Constructors' Championship, and of course most importantly, this ranking. That, of course, rounds out your top 10 ratings for the 2022 Formula One season. Let me know if you individually would make any changes down in the comments below. Whilst you're down there, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I'll see you next time.